Designing Your Life is written by two people who worked at Apple for a long time in design and engineering. The premise of the book is that the same approach that the authors used for designing physical products like laptops and phones can be applied to designing your life. The same principles can be used by people to be more successful and more fulfilled in their lives. The overarching principle of the book is to think like a designer. Now, what does that mean? I'm going to boil it down to four principles that they talk about. The first principle is that designers don't think their way forward, they build their way forward. You move forward by trying things, by testing things, by building prototypes. Let's take an example to understand this better. Say you're trying to decide on a career. Let's assume you're a visually creative person. You've been interested in architecture, interior design, and also graphic design, but you can't decide which one you like the most. One approach, which I think most of us fall victim to, is to try and think our way out of the problem. We say things like, oh, let me go on a vacation, clear my mind, and keep thinking till I get an answer. Maybe we make a pros and cons list, or maybe we read some books. But good designers have a very different approach. They focus on building their way forward. So, how is that different? You say, let me actually do something, get some real hands on experience, which will then help me answer the question better. If you're trying to figure out whether to have a home button on the iPhone or not, good designers don't sit and make a pros and cons list or try to brainstorm or think their way out of the problem like this. They will build their way out by building prototypes and trying different solutions. And then they'll play around with those solutions, get some hands on experience, and then solve the problem. So, how does this apply to our career question? Well, you are trying to figure out what work you'll enjoy. So, maybe do a small project in each of those fields that you are considering. Get some hands on experience. And this hands on approach will inform your decision much, much better than trying to think your way out. And when you are going about prototyping and trying different things, there is a particular mindset that you need to develop. As we said, you need to think like a designer. And one critical aspect is that you should not have a preconceived outcome in mind. You don't go into it thinking, I'm pretty sure architecture is the right answer for me, but whatever, I'll try these things out. Because that will create a bias in your mind. And when you're trying out, say, graphic design, there'll be this voice in your head which is saying, this isn't really going to work out. I think architecture is the right answer for me. And what's the point of even doing this? So, no, you don't get attached to a particular outcome. You submit yourself to the process and you trust the process. So, honestly, I find this insanely hard to do. And I think most people will find it very hard because we are not okay with things being unresolved. We are not okay with uncertainty. So, we tend to keep jumping to conclusions and then we are not truly open minded to the different outcomes. So, one thing that helps you not get attached to a particular outcome is an attitude to focus only on the next steps. You only focus on what happens next and not some distant end product or final result. So, yes, you want to get the answers, but you have to be patient and trust that the new experiences will help you answer it. Again, I have always found it really hard to do this. I've always had a tendency to think too far ahead and get too fascinated and obsessed with plans and ideas. First I'll do step one and then step two and then all the way till step 100. And it took me a long time to realize that this was a huge waste of time and energy because what actually happens is that the moment you do step one and two, you learn very important new stuff that fundamentally changes all the remaining steps. So, why think so far ahead? By the way, the same philosophy is captured in very famous concepts like getting things done and agile or scrum. So these ideas have really taught me to be wary of those grand long-term plans and focus almost entirely on the next few steps or the next prototype because by the time we finish that, the long term plan would have changed entirely and for good reason. So embrace the chaos, embrace the uncertainty, and focus only on the next steps. Another key principle is don't fall in love with your first idea. So, Dave, one of the authors of the book, has an interesting story, one that I think many of us can relate to. Dave always wanted to be a marine biologist, and this was because of two reasons. The first one was that he was obsessed with this one TV show that explored underwater life, and the second was that he really liked his high school biology teacher. So Dave decided to major in biology when he went to Stanford for college, but Stanford didn't offer marine biology courses. So most of Dave's classes were in molecular biology and biochemistry. And Dave absolutely hated it. He was feeling horrible and doing terribly. Everyone around him kept asking him, "Why are you doing biology?" Because he was no good at it. Dave wasted 2.5 years of his life going in the wrong direction. Fortunately, he realized this, changed his major to mechanical engineering, and went on to design and engineer many products at Apple. Now, the authors point out if Dave thought like a designer, he would have approached things very differently. He would have wanted to know exactly what a marine biologist does, and he would have spoken to some marine biologists. He would have tried stuff. He could have spent some time in the open sea and discovered whether it was as glamorous as it looked on TV. He could have volunteered on a research vessel. So, the big insight here is to be wary of your first idea. We have a tendency to fall in love with our first idea and then refuse to let it go, no matter how badly it turns out. But our first idea might not be the best idea. Now, I know there are entire generations that have not thought beyond their first idea. Honestly, even I did not, and I think most of my generation did not. But hey, it's never too late. And the fourth principle is to create more choice. This is very important and a big part of the design mindset. Designers know that when you choose from lots of options, you choose better. And again, for some people, it can be very unsettling to start thinking about what else you could be doing in life. But once you understand the process and trust the process, it can really lead to some amazing outcomes. So, these are the four insights or principles that we learn by adopting the design thinking mindset, and they very much apply to designing your life. Now we'll talk about how to put these principles into action. But before that, I'll share another big insights that the authors share. The authors have a section of the book which is titled Anti-Passion is Our Passion. The authors of this book hate the word passion, and this is because most people don't know what their passion is. Studies have found that only 20% of the people up till the age of 26 know what their passion is. So then telling them to follow your passion doesn't make any sense. Most people can't make much of it. The research shows that for most people, passion comes after they try something, discover they like it, and develop mastery, not before. Passion is the result of a good life design, not the cause. So, this is another mind blowing insight, guys. You may have heard of the word ikigai, which is a Japanese word for this state where you are able to align a bunch of different things, where you have found something that you're good at, that you enjoy doing, and that you can get paid for. And the authors are basically saying that passion is something that you feel after you figure this out, not before. And this is so true for me personally. Only after being in the real world for 5 to 7 years and doing a bunch of stuff did I really find my passion. Okay, so now let's get to the practices. How do you really implement these principles that we've talked about? The book is all about many different exercises and practices that will help you build your way into a well designed life. Of course, we won't be getting into all the actual exercises, but I'll share with you an overview. The first step is to create a dashboard for yourself that tells you where you currently stand on four different dimensions of life: health, work, play, and love. This is your compass. So you keep coming back to it again and again. And the idea is to improve each dimension where you feel you are falling short. The next step is to create a wide range of choices for yourself. We already spoke about how you choose better when you have more choices. And in the book, they have a bunch of exercises that will help you come up with more and more choices of what to do with your life. Now, with all these options, the authors help you devise what they call Odyssey plans. And here's another mind blowing insight from the book. The authors say we all contain enough energy and talents and interests to live many different types of lives, all of which could be authentic and interesting and productive. Basically, we all have multiple lives within ourselves. And this is something that I've really related to. Like, I happen to be an entrepreneur, but I can see myself being a scientist or a philosopher or a writer or many things, honestly. And the authors say this is true for each of us. Each human has the potential to be many different things. I think we all have this default assumption that there is only one best way to spend our life. But I couldn't agree more with the authors. We all have multiple lives within us, and we could be successful in so many different things. So, Odyssey plans try to capture some of the lives we have within us. To create Odyssey plans, you have to imagine and write up three different versions of the next 5 years of your life. And the interesting thing is, this is not plan A, plan B, and plan C. Every Odyssey plan is a plan A because it's really you and it's really possible. And once we have generated these ideas, we move to prototyping. The authors describe many different ways of prototyping these different lives or careers. These are things like a life design interview, where you meet a person who does what you want to do and ask them questions. You can prototype experiences, where you actually spend a day doing the job that you want to learn about, or shadow a person who does that job. And the best option is to actually do internships, where you are doing the job for a longer period. But prototyping is not a thought experiment. It has to involve real, hands on experience in the real world. And throughout this process, you're going back to your dashboard and measuring how well you are doing on the four parameters and thinking whether you need to make further changes. So, that was a brief overview of the practices. Of course, if these ideas have been interesting to you, I would highly recommend you get the book and go through the actual exercises. Coming back to education, I hope you can see that the entire big picture process is basically a process of designing your life. So let's take a few steps back. We started with talking about freedom, autonomy, and the natural drive to learn. With big picture, we spoke about connecting all this to the real world. And that might have seemed a bit arbitrary. Or you may think, oh, that's their angle on education. Just like some schools focus on social and emotional learning, or some focus on being connected to nature. So it may have seemed like an arbitrary angle that's being brought in. But once we start looking at all of this with the perspective of designing your life, I hope you can see that this is not some arbitrary take on education. In fact, it's not even about education, it's much bigger than that. It's about life. Big picture is about how to figure out your life. It's about learning to create a successful, meaningful, and fulfilling life for yourself. And nobody can teach you that, but there are some processes and perspectives that can be really helpful. And we're trying to build a whole system of education around that, around figuring out what are you good at, what you enjoy doing, and what you can get paid for. Now let's compare this to the traditional system and the traditional way of going about school and life. Most of your effort and energy for the first, 20-25 years goes into learning some academic stuff that you literally forget the day after your exam. Like, really, I think you spend 40,000 hours over 7,000 days doing completely useless and meaningless stuff. They call it learning or education, but really it's an industrial process where you're just doing what you're told. You're just jumping through hoops that others have created for you. And this whole time, you have absolutely no idea of the real world that you are going to suddenly enter at the end of this journey. You've never done a job. You've never been in a real world organization. You have no idea what kind of work you like or dislike or what you're good at. And suddenly you have to decide on a career that you're going to do for the rest of your life. What are the chances that this goes right? What is the probability that you end up doing something that feels meaningful to you? And what are the chances that you will be happy with your work and happy with your life? So, I hope you understand how important and how meaningful the big picture process and the life design process really is. If we want to prepare kids for the real world, then I really can't think of a better approach than the big picture process.